Ian Tregonning is an Australian puppeteer, puppet maker and performer based in Fremantle, Western Australia. In the mid-1980s, he was a founding ensemble member of Spare Parts Puppet Theatre Company before going on to work on such feature films as The Labyrinth, Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Babe. This is his story.
I was studying theatre at Waite, which is now Curtin University, West Australian Institute of Technology, and this weird puppet person came and did a residency, Peter Wilson, who was from the Tasmanian Puppet Company at that stage. The West Australian government said, come and start a puppet company here in Perth, which was the Spare Parts Puppet Theatre. So he brought in his puppet maker and his administrator from other companies, started this company, and they gave him some money for training because he realised there was no one in Perth who really knew anything about puppets. So they employed a puppet maker who was a sculptor who'd never made puppets before, employed a couple of puppeteers, and basically as soon as they started they had to start earning money, so they went out on the road. Pretty much learnt on the job. Took me on as a stage manager originally because they realised this had to get a second show out and they needed a stage manager, a road manager kind of thing. And I think about the second or third week of rehearsals, they realised they actually needed a second puppeteer as well. They said, well, you're not doing anything at that moment, come on and do this puppet, do this bit of narration, then go back and turn the lights on. And so I was doing everything backstage, including what was on stage, and driving the truck and everything. So it was kind of thrown in the deep end. Because we also get roped into making the puppets as well, because if you don't make the puppets, you won't have a puppet to play with. So, when we weren't out on the road performing in mostly schools in those days, I'd started as a trainee, I'd become a puppeteer, I'd become a senior puppeteer, and I was helping train the puppeteers that were coming through. The next logical step was me to direct something, and the next step was, what is the next step? And they basically said, well, you've really got to go and work for another company now. You've really got to go and get some experience doing different things, different input, whatever. It was a good thing in the long run, but at the time it was a little bit, So around about that time, I was looking to move to the eastern states, to Sydney or Melbourne. And at that time, my brother suddenly decided he was going to go on holidays, and he said, well, why don't you come too? And I thought, well, why not, have a holiday as well. And so when I was in London, I started thinking, I know some people in London, I'll go and look them up. And though I think my brother and his friends were in London for about a week or two, and I decided to stay with my friends who were there, and they said, well, you can come and stay with us. They had a two-bedroom bed set, there was nowhere for me to sleep, but, you can come and stay with us, but you've got to see if you can get a job while you're here. So I thought, oh, okay, we'll give it a go. So I knew of another puppet maker who I'd met maybe a couple of times from Sydney, who was working on The Labyrinth. And I had his number, so I rang him, saying, I'd really like to come and see what you're doing. I mean, The Labyrinth at that stage was just a movie with puppets. It's got a sort of legendary status now because it was one of the first puppet movies that had ever been made, really, of this new, interesting style of puppet that Jim Henson had developed. It was revolutionary. And so I really, initially, I just wanted to get in the workshop door and see what they were building, because that sounded fantastic. So I rang this guy, and he's vaguely remembered me and said, oh yeah, well, I'll ask, see if you can come and have a look. So I rang him a few times, and it always seemed, I can't quite do it, it was always not quite working. So I was just about gave up, and I said, well, is there any work going, and he said, oh yeah, well, they're they're looking for people to do this really menial kind of gluing hair on job. You know, I'll put your name forward. And he also gave me the name of someone else to ring about puppeteering on the film, which was basically impossible, because to get work on a film you had to be in British Actors Equity. To get in British Actors Equity you had to have worked on a film. Anyway, I rang this guy, you know, and said, "Hi, I'm a puppeteer, I'm over from Australia, you know, I just wanted to know if there's any opportunity to blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Oh yes, or I'll take down your details and I'll let you know if anything comes up." I thought, you know, I'm not getting anywhere with this guy. Anyway, I rang him one time, he said, eventually he said, "Oh, you haven't had any marionette experience, have you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, we got trained in marionettes." He said, "Oh, well, there's an audition coming up." You know, gave me the details. He said, "I'll put your name down for that." You know, so turn up to Elstree Studios, which is way out of London, on a certain time, and bloody blah blah blah. So I thought, oh well, that's nice. You know, I didn't think anything. That was probably the moment that changed my life. In between, I think when that happened and when the audition actually was, I also got a phone call back, or I rang this woman about this menial jobs in the puppet making side of it, and that was sticking the fur on the fireys. I don't know if you remember that scene with all the red and white, the guys who pull their heads off and dance around the fire. Well, there was 4 different versions of each puppet that did different things. You know, one the head came off, one the arms extended, one, you know, whatever the things they'd thought of. So they'd made trick puppets. So they made 4 different versions of the same puppet to do different things. And they weren't really sure what they were going to do with the song. They just sort of put all these things together and were going to rehearse it, you know, before they shot it, sort of thing. So what we had to do was match the fur. They had all this table full of goat hair that had all been dyed different colours, different shades of red and orange and white, and we had to find bits of fur that were the right sort of colour, the right length, went the right way, you know, it was the right size, all this sort of thing. It was just this amazing sort of jigsaw of putting bits of fur on this puppet. It was crazy, and there was about 10 of us all going through, and, you know, sort of after a while your eyes start crossing and you can't, you know. So we had the bodies laid out and the original, you know, that we had to copy, and then we had to find bits of fur that would fit on the other ones. So it was a crazy time. And after, you know, a 10-hour day of doing that, I remember riding home on the tube train, looking at the guy's hair across the way, going, "Gee, that really stuck on well, didn't it?" And then I went to this audition, which was actually run by a guy called Dave Barclay, who was the marionette, in charge of the marionette stuff. But the marionettes turned out to be more special effects rather than actual traditional marionettes. So they had all these scenes with goblins in the bedroom at the end, and also the jump magic thing where all the goblins David Bowie singing the song. So there were puppets all around the walls, you know, and up through the floor wherever they could fit them, but there were some that they had to have full length in between sort of the two things to fill out the supposedly hundreds of goblins in this goblin city. So they wanted marionettes to just stand there, but they didn't want the wires, they didn't want the string, so they had to, you know, reduce the strings down to as little as possible, which also means your puppet doesn't do much. Quite often they had 3 strings, which basically, you know, that's all you can do, you know, but you had to make it look like it was, you know, dancing and all this sort of stuff. So we did this this weird thing where on one hand they hamstring you, but on the other hand they want you to do everything. So yeah, it was quite weird. And also a lot of pulling strings to make other things move, you know, in the background, and sort of all that sort of thing. So that was interesting and very different to what I'd done before. But I seemed to be quite good at it, because the guy who was running it, Dave Barclay, then gave me lots of other jobs after that, you know, on other movies doing special effectsy type things. So that again was another lucky break, you know. The other lucky break was after our audition had finished, or we got about halfway through, I think. Dave Barclay said, oh well, I've seen all what you guys can do, and I know that the general audition is starting in the other room. Let's all go to that. Just about every puppeteer in England was there. On that one day I met, so many people who were all brilliant puppeteers and whatever. Not only that, Kevin Clash, one of the major Muppeteers, was there. Jim Henson was there. Frank Oz walked in and walked out again. You couldn't pay for an experience like that. And just because I made a phone call at the right time, you just watch them pick up a puppet and you go, wow, these guys are fantastic. They're some of the best puppeteers in the world. Making puppets out of foam before Jim Henson had never been done, well, no, never been done before, but the moving mouth, moving hand puppet was not known as well as it is now. Now it's just, oh yeah, it's a Muppet. Everybody knows what it is. Whether you have like a Kermit, where you got the moving mouth and the hands on rods, or whether you put your hand inside the character like Cookie Monster. When Sesame Street came out, everyone went, wow, look at this. Also, the way he used the camera frame. Previously, when we go back to Muffin the Mule or Mr. Squiggle, the frame would be set up and the puppets do their thing and the camera follows the puppets, whereas it was almost in reverse with Jim Henson, where the puppeteers can actually see the frame. They've got a monitor so they can see what it looks like. They're actually kind of directing their own movements in the scene in real time. And that was all new. Also, the materials he was using, the fleece material, the foam, these are all, he would constantly be looking out at the new materials that were coming out for industrial use and saying, oh, how could we use this? The reflecting things in the eyes. So when the puppet actually looked down the camera, you'd get this red glow in the eye, and it was just like, it was like really evil and sinister. Apparently on Dark Crystal, so the legend goes, he wanted to zoom in on a hand of one of the characters for a shot, and it wasn't up to that kind of quality. They'd made it as a background character, so they had to do all sorts of stuff to get around using this puppet. So in the Labyrinth, he just said everything has to be built so that I can zoom into any part of the puppet and it'll look fantastic. And the detail, the quality of the making of all of the puppets were just stunning. Do you remember Ludo summons the rocks?
Yep. This
big hairy character goes, "Argh," and all the rocks come rolling towards him. Well, they'd built this mechanism, this rubber rock basically, with a sprocket that went all the way around the outside and had a motor in the middle with another little wheel. So when to make it roll, you just start this motor up and it would start going up the side of this rock and pull it forward. Do you see what I mean? And then they would attach several other rocks on strings behind it, so they would all look like they were coming. And if you look carefully, you can see that. I shouldn't let out these secrets. But they built these things because in principle, no one ever built one before, but in principle they thought, well, this should work. And they switched it on and just didn't go anywhere. So apparently they had to shoot the next week, so they're starting to panic. And Jim found out about this, so he just said, right, who's the person in the world who knows about this? So they found some guy in America who's a props maker who, had done this before, flew him out there, paid him whatever he wanted. He solved the problem in a couple of days, and they went ahead and shot. That kind of look, let's just get the best person. Jim was doing that all the time. Jim Henson had this knack. He employed me. He wasn't driven by ego. This is my company and I'm going to do it like this. This is my film. He was always saying, who can I get in to do this for me? And including all his finance people and stuff. They're all really top quality, and hence maybe in the long term he made a lot of money, not in the short term. But he made amazing films, and The Labyrinth is still, judged as one of the yardsticks that other children's films are gauged by. In those days, he was just this American puppeteer guy who's, he's the director this week. That's good. And he's a nice guy, and he's a hippie. He's an old hippie. He's all like, yeah, man, yeah. He never would go to even the Muppeteers and say, look, this is how I want you to say that scene. This is what I want. He would just come up if someone did something he didn't like, he'd come up and say, if I was doing that scene, I would do it a bit like this, And if the guy said, no, I don't like that, he would go, okay, fine. That was his style of directing. But then, that little seed would go in your head, and you go, yeah, maybe you're right. I'll try it that way. I mean, everyone wanted to please him. That was his big thing. He was such a nice guy. Anyway, and also Frank Oz and all those other guys who went on to be directors. They also directed their own bits of, anything. Yoda's in. You're going to ignore what Frank Oz says. He was a very quiet. He'd go and chat to the actors rather than shout at them. And try to motivate them rather than tell them how to say their lines, which is the way you should direct, really. And good luck trying to direct David Bowie, and just wandering around the set and looking at the stuff they'd built and how it worked, it's just amazing. Brian Froud's designs and the way this craftsmanship, how they'd built all that stuff, and the Goblin City itself was forced perspective, so as you went down a little street it got narrower and narrower and the houses got smaller, that sort of thing. That was one of the reasons they shot it in London at the time, was that the craftsman of the builders was just so fantastic. One of the other things was the big Panavision cameras that they used. You don't buy a Panavision camera, you just rent it for the time that you're shooting the movie, and then it goes back to the factory and gets rebuilt every time. But every movie it works on, it gets a little plaque. So it looks like this camera has done, and all these movies on the side of the camera, and you just read them and go, wow, amazing. I remember talking to a second unit. Oh no, this was much later. He was in charge of the set dressing, the overall design look of matching what the second unit was doing to the first unit. I was talking to him, and he said something about, we worked on Battleship Potemkin, and I'm going, yeah, what? It's legendary bloody films. He would have been a 15-year-old or something. He's a runner on this movie, but he'd done all this stuff, and the second unit DOP might have been Roger Rabbit, actually. The second unit DOP, director of photography, was this very old guy that everyone called Sir. Never actually worked out what his name was. That was his name, Sir. And I got talking to him at one point, and the Railway Children, he directed, this black and white classic movie. These guys were working, in the early days. It was amazing. So I did The Labyrinth, then I did Little Shop of Horrors. Yeah. And that was a lot of the same people. That was Brian Henson was in charge. Brian Henson, who was one of the puppeteers in The Labyrinth, who was just, this, 16-year-old kid mucking around. He was in charge of the plant unit, the puppeteer side of the plant. But that was another 6 months, you're working with these people and getting to know them, and then after that was, oh God, Shop of Horrors, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I think. No, that was through Dave Barclay, who was the marionette specialist guy. He got the job of the specialist, because Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a movie with no puppets, really. It was a movie with people, but also cartoon characters. And the cartoon characters, picked up real glasses and drank out of them, and put them, smashed tables and did all sorts of weird things. Had real handcuffs on them. There were so many firsts on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because they'd never done as complicated animation with real world people, sets, smoke. Never had done that before, and I remember so often when they were shooting it, they had two guys from Industrial Light and Magic who were watching who were the special effects guys who had to put it all together at the end, and they were watching like a hawk because they kept saying things like, well, in theory this should work, but we've never actually done it before. You know, and we had to work out how to manipulate the props basically, because they had these sized rubber versions of the characters, so we sort of would stick them in frame when they were framing up, you know, setting the shot in the first place, doing the lighting and all that, to say, well, this is sort of where it's going to be and how big it's going to be, and this is the sort of movement it's going to do. And then we'd have to find ways of, you know, if he's holding a glass, that glass would have to stay in its hand and go across the stage, and the rod go across the screen. The rod that holds it would hopefully be hidden within where the puppet was going to be drawn. It's a very complicated kind of concept. If you have a rod, you're going to have a rod in puppet, in shot, you know, and go across, but then someone's got to get rid of that, and they can do that a lot easier now than in the old days. But if you can conceal it where they're going to draw the animation, then you're saving yourself a lot of money. A lot of marionetting machine guns in one scene where the weasels burst into Bob Hoskins' where he lives. Yeah, I think it was his office, but it was also he had an apartment.
Yeah. Is that when he's hiding Roger Rabbit in the sink?
Yeah, that's the one, and all that. You know, water spurting out. You know, when he pops up, water spurts out. That's a hose, you know, that comes up like this that spurts real water. You know, not sort of. These days they just do it in CG. You know, it wouldn't be an issue. But all these things we had to work out how to do. The octopus bartender who's pouring drinks and lighting cigarettes and doing something else, taking money off someone and using the cash register, all with his 8 different arms, you know, all at once, was, you know, about 10 of us in about 5 up in the roof pulling strings, and 5 more guys underneath working the tills and different things. So we had and again, all the octopusy things were drawn in later. We had a lighter that self-lit itself. The 2 wires were wires that you run a charge through, and that would set the lighter going. You know, interesting experiment to try. Get a marionette a bottle of gin into a glass from, you know, up there somewhere. So as you tip the water out of the bottle, the centre of gravity changes and the water comes out. That forces the bottle away. As the water goes into the glass, it pushes that away. So I had to practice all these things so that it looked like, you know, no effort, you know, no problem. But when we started, it was just like, you know, everything went everywhere. It was great, interesting stuff. There's maybe a year between these things where I'd come back to Australia or I'd stay in London and do something else. So I did other things. A TV series in England called Radio Roo, where I was a kangaroo character on an early morning children's thing. Puppets live at some ungodly hour in the morning, children's sitcom kind of thing, half-hour program. Originally it was a rat character, like Roland Rat, who was another character. They wanted something similar, and I don't know if it was whether I auditioned, obviously an Australian, and they said, oh, what about a kangaroo? And it was always talking about Rolf. Rolf was just dropped in, you missed him. No, we couldn't afford any other characters, any other celebrities to come in, but we'd always talk about, you know, oh, Kylie was here last night, you know. My co-host was Dennis, who was the guy who was in charge of putting the video tapes on for the BBC shows. So he had this big reel-to-reel old video recorder, and you know, when he got the message from upstairs, he pushed the button, and of course everything was going wrong before that moment. Just, you know, when the button, he said push the button, he pushed the button, and the cartoon would come on. I had to be picked up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and they had a driver come and collect me because they didn't trust. Well, actually the tubes weren't running at that time in the morning, so they had to get me there somehow. And then by 9 o'clock, you know, our working day would be over and we'd go and have breakfast. It was very strange life. Muppet Treasure Island, again, they wanted lots of puppets in the background of, the cameras going past, and there's puppets in windows in the background of the city, and on the boat there's lots of puppets. I got involved in the sort of special effects side of things. At one point they had a model of the Hispaniola, which is the ship they all go travelling around in. I can't remember why they go travelling a ship, but anyway. So they had a model built much smaller for the long shots, and they CG'd in water and stuff. And again, they were just going to get some of the crew to wiggle it around to make it look like it was sailing. And Jim Henson or Brian or whoever it was said, no, I've got to have a puppeteer do that. So the job was actually given to, let me start there again. The job was given to John Henson, who is the older brother of Brian, who does Sweetums. Big, if you know Fraggle Rock, the big character, and a few other things. He does a lot of the live stage shows as well. So he's more a suit performer. Anyway, they gave the job to him, but then of course his character came up to shoot stuff for him, so he had to keep disappearing, and I was his sub, as it were. As it happened, most of the shooting was done when I was there rather than John was there, because he kept having to go over to shoot something else. The model unit, which is where this was, is they have a time frame that either it happens before we go home today or it happens tomorrow. There was no, there's so many things that have to be put right, and all I was doing was making the boat look like it was sort of going through the waves. We had footage that they were matching to, so I was sort of trying to judge how big the waves were. It sounds complicated, but really it's just a bit instinctive, just sort of shoot all this stuff and you're never sure what's going to end up on the cutting room floor. There's probably a few seconds of it. I spent weeks doing that. But also we started getting a little adventurous and saying, well, if the ship's sailing, then there'll be characters in the rigging, and wouldn't it be nice if one of the characters was scurrying up the rigging, so I made a little mechanism so I could make this guy climb up the rigging, and other characters on board deck, pointing or doing something. So because we were bored, we started inventing these things, and they'd shoot them, and knowing full well that most of them will never get seen or on, actually in the film. The most fantastic thing was watching Michael Caine work, because of course he was playing Scrooge, and of course we were sort of waiting around for things to happen, and occasionally he would come and do some acting, and I would be watching, and a lot of people would just come to watch him work. Because I remember thinking at one point, I wonder when he's going to start to act. Because, quite often you rehearse it, you just say the lines, I'm going to stand here, I'm going to look this way, and then at that point I'll look this way, it's just for the lighting, and, you run through it a few times. And then he'd come to, that's action, and he'd do the same thing, and I'm going, when's he going to start acting, Was that was just the first take? Okay, he's going to really do it this time. And when you look at it on screen, that's what he does. He's fantastic. It just works because he's being real. And if you read his book, which you can buy on the internet, come to my website, which is called. It's not many people know that. I think it's on acting or something. There's some, I forget what it is. And the other thing he said that I remember, and he said, never blink. Don't blink while you're on camera. And I'm going, don't be ridiculous. Of course you blink. You watch him when it is films. He never blinks. And you've always got that connection. With Dr. Dolittle, where I was working the head of the tiger, that Eddie Murphy was operating on. There's just so much exaggeration, shall I say. There's a hole in the top of the lion's head, and he's working away, trying to relieve the pressure in his brain or something. And at some point, Eddie sticks his finger in this lion's head. And there's two medical consultants who had been brought in to show them how to work all that. They had all this fancy equipment, and one of them said, you know, hospitals don't have this much stuff, you know, that, anyway, to pad it out as set dressing. And they explained to Eddie how you did, you know, brain surgery, you know, in about 5 minutes, you know, you do this and Eddie had improvised and just sort of said, oh, stuck his finger in his brain. I don't know if that made the movie, but you could see them in the corner going, oh my God, that tiger is dead. He had an entourage of about 12 people who followed him around everywhere. Not quite sure what they all did, but but talking to him, we were gobsmacked that we were saying, well, Eddie, you know, he'd done Metro and, you know, Changing Places and all these iconic movies, you know, Eddie Murphy movies, you know, there were a whole string of them that came out, and every year, you know, there'd be another one to watch, and they're all great. And he was such a, well, you know, he was Eddie Murphy. And he's doing Dr. Dolittle, and, you know, there's a break, and we're chatting to him and say, you know, well, what do you do next, you know? And he says, oh, I'm not sure. Saying, you know, well, someone said you could just about dictate, you know, what you want to do next, you know, what do you want to do next? And he said, oh, no, I have to, my people have to decide what, you know, what job I'm going to get offered, sort of thing. Or I suppose he probably gets lots of offers, but he has to choose which one to do. And that apparently wasn't up to him. And we're just saying, how can that be? You know, you're Eddie Murphy. If you don't have control over your own destiny, you know, it's hard to, maybe he was just trying not to say anything, you know, or, you know, trying not to start gossip rumours or whatever. But it seemed to me that he was like, you know, oh, I just go along with whatever, you know, whatever happens. And it was gobsmacked to me that you got that far in the industry, but you still had no control over your career. It seems crazy. The only movie that I'm not credited is Loch Ness Monster, which was only a week's work or something. Right at the end in the movie, they go into this cavern, and there's several of these big dinosaur-y things, monsters. We were operating the really strange rig for that. Well, this was actually the one that swam, which is different to the Brontosaurus. But you can imagine the sort of thing, a little head on a long neck. And they wanted it, you know, the end with the face on it obviously worked through normal sort of Henson animatronic kind of rig with servos and stuff in the head. But the neck was all this amazing mechanism of UV joints sort of thing that were operated, I kid you not, by two big steering wheels off a boat, you know, ships or yacht steering wheels that were about this big. They were massive. So each puppeteer had two of these things, and depending, one worked that axis and the other worked the other axis. So it was just so completely bonkers way of doing it. But, you know, you arrive at the gig and that's the gig. So you go, okay, so we've got to work it out. So you had no way of knowing when you were centred either. So the only way you could do it is to crank the thing all the way up, so it's at its highest point, and then go down like 4 turns or something, and then you knew you were at the midpoint. Does that make sense? Yes. And then, you know, if you had to turn left from there, you know, or right from there, you know, this thing, you know, and there were 4 of us, I think, on the one neck, and we all had to coordinate, and then the person who was doing the mouth would be on a separate remote station, you know, so we all had communications. We were all saying, right, you know, turn left, you know, whatever. And then there was someone else shouting at us, the top one isn't quite far enough, you know, give it another turn. So we'd rehearse all this and then we'd shoot it. Anyway, that was pretty bonkers. But for some reason, whatever reason, they don't have to give you a credit unless it's in your contract on a movie. Another life lesson. You might, if you're signing, you know, say, oh, work on a movie, great, yeah. Am I going to get a credit? You know, because credits are important. You know, that's how people know what you've done. You know, and it doesn't matter whether you made the tea or what. You know, you need a credit, or the T-shirt. which I've got several of. I was the second puppeteer on the Babe character. So Mac Wilson, who also I did a lot of work with, and he's a fantastic puppeteer, was doing the main lip sync and stuff and pre-programming all that, or quite often you'd have a bit of movement and then you'd push the button and it'd go into the lip sync, so it was sort of blending the whole lot together sort of thing. I was doing the snout of the character, of the pig, and the ears or eyebrows or whatever else, you know, what he couldn't do, I had on my controls. It's a bit like rubbing your tummy and patting your head at the same time. It's very, when you're working a puppet where you're doing the eyes and the eyebrows and the mouth and the nose and everything else all at once, your brain just fractures into 1,000 different pieces. So it's, yeah. In the old days, you know, one puppeteer would be doing the eyebrows, the other would be doing the eyes. So you'd have like 6 puppeteers working one face of a character. Then with the computers, they realised they could duplicate the process. So the one puppeteer could record some stuff and then work live on other stuff. By the end of when I was making films, they were getting into motion capture, where you, at one stage I trialled a thing where you would stick polystyrene balls on your face, and as you moved your facial muscles, the computer would interpret that and transfer it to the servos on the puppet. So you could, or a CG image, you know, a computer graphic image. That's all standard now. Some techie people will argue, oh no, you know, we don't need puppeteers for that. Or what they do now is shoot an actor performing and then they just transfer that onto the CG character or whatever. Or they capture a person and then they animate him, so if that character dies, they just carry on. Now, is that puppetry? I don't know. It's all so easy now. But what I ask you, young people, are you doing about it? You've got all this facility. You can do it in your home. Get out there, make a movie.